Right, now it's time to look at some of the stories and headlines that have been playing out in East Africa, where a number of fast moving stories from investigations into protest related deaths in Tanzania to a visa hack exposing tens of thousands of travelers from Kenya and neighboring states, as well as Madagascar's new leader outlining his agenda. Well, to unpack these stories, we now speak to journalist and team leader at Grassroot Journalism in Kenya, Dennis Beru. Dennis, always good to talk to you. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. Jambo, habari yako?
Salama sana, hope uko mzima Peter Doro.
Okay, so let's start with this. On Monday, Tanzania's president announced a federal inquiry into the deaths of protesters after the recent election. I wonder what this step signals about accountability and how credible is the process seen from Nairobi.
Wow, asante sana Peter Doro. Of course, for the very first time, we've seen the Tanzanian President Samia Suluhu saying that the government will launch an inquiry into the deadly an arrest that erupted following the controversial re-election last month. And of course, the claim of an democratic vote process prompted the mass protest. And she was speaking during the first opening of the Tanzanian new parliament on Friday, where she was deeply saddened by the incident and offered condolences to the families of those lost their loved ones in the crackdown. And of course, quoting her, she said that of course the government has taken the step of forming an inquiry commission to investigate what happened. And of course, Peter Ndoro, her comments marks the first reconciliatory message since the Tanzanian authorities violently cracked down on a widespread demonstration following the country's October 29th presidential election. And Hassan, of course, was declared the winner of the vote with nearly 98% support after leading rival or the leading rivals were barred from participating. Of course, that fueled anger and frustration among many Tanzanians who said the contest was very unfair. And while the exact death toll still unclear, the Tanzanian main opposition party said hundreds of people were killed as government sent troops into the streets to disperse the protest. Although it also imposed an internet blackout on the East African nation. And of course, we've seen right groups led by the Amnesty International saying that the authorities committed a grave human rights violation that include unlawful killing and enforced disappearance, and of course unlawful detention, where most of the young people are still detained and they are yet to be charged. And of course, Peter Ndoro, we've seen the United Nations Human Rights Chief Volker Turk also urged the Tanzanian government earlier this week to investigate the killings and other rights violation. Of course, we are waiting to see what will happen because it is said that, of course, those who perpetrated this act are the police officers or government officers. So we will see whether there will be a commission of inquiry will be in place, and of course the report will be ready.
Talking about unlawful killings, we come to your country, Kenya, now, where I believe a young Kenyan mother was reportedly killed, and with the alleged involvement of a British soldier, and their families struggling at this time to get justice for her. Tell us a little bit more about this story.
Thank you so much. Of course, Peter Ndoro, this is a case that, of course, the Kenyan have been following since 2012. And of course, it involved a British soldier who is now, of course, facing extradition to Kenya in connection with an alleged murder of a 21-year-old woman in 2012. And according to the National Crime Agency, NCA, said that Robert James Pankins was arrested in Tidworth, Warwickshire on 6th of November and appeared at Westminster Magistrate Court on Friday. And he was arrested by the specialist officers from NTA, National Extradition Unit, in connection with the killing of Agnes Wanjiru. After a warrant was issued in September, the agency added, of course, Mr. Parkins, who is now 38 years old, told the court he intended to contest the extradition, and of course, he was remanded in custody ahead of his next appearance as at the same court on 14th November, of which that really happened. And of course, Wanjiru's body was discovered in a septic tank near a hotel in the town of Nanyuki, and about 104 miles from the north of Nairobi. Of course, Peter Ndoro, we've seen these, and for the very first time, we are seeing justice being near to the family of Agnes Wanjiru. And remember, a body was found near British training army camp on the night she was killed. And of course, she had reportedly been at a bar with friends where British soldiers were also present. And the family representative to this case, that is Esther Njoki, now the Wanjiru's niece, met the UK Defence Minister last month in order to push for the Parkins extradition. And of course, in a statement issued through a lady, the lawyer acting for Mr. Wanjiru's family on Friday said that the family is incredibly relieved to hear that the suspect in my or has been arrested. So that shows that, of course, justice is near for the family of Agnes Wanjiru.
Then we're reading about the story of a cybersecurity breach in the region affecting not just your country but 4 other African countries, exposing, I believe, as many as 35,000 travelers. Tell us a little bit about this story and the source, the country where this breach happened, and how it's affected so many people.
Yeah, this is so sad. Of course, a cybersecurity, breach in Somalia's electronic e-visa system that has exposed, a personal data of over 35,000 travelers, including the citizens of South Africa, Uganda. We have the Somalian, Ethiopian, of course, Kenya being the most affected with over 13,000 of them. Of course, Peter Ndoro, the breach, which has been independently verified by the Somaliland Chronicles, of course, compromised the data such as full names, the passport numbers, the date of birth, passport photos, and banking information used for visa payment. Of course, the security experts warned that the exposed information is now circulating in the criminal networks and could be exploited for fraud or by the terrorist groups that include the Al-Shabaab, making this one of the most serious digital security incidents affecting international travelers in the region. Of course, the breach, of course, I've said it was now verified. The Somali Chronicle, of course, was discovered by Abdi Daoud, the lead architect and the enterprise system expert. Of course, now the verification endpoint of the visa system, which requires no authentication and authorization, or the rate limiting, allowing anyone with internet access to sequentially access the applicant's sensitive data. So this is after, of course, Somalia launched the e-electronic visa just a few months ago, and of course, we have seen this. And Kenya has 13,000 people affected. The United Kingdom 3,028, United States 2,298, along with the travelers from Netherlands, Colombia, Sweden, Canada, India, and Somalia itself.
All right, let's go to Madagascar now, where President Michael Randrianirina made his first State of the Nation address, and this almost a month after taking power. Tell us a little bit about this national address and how it may have been received by Madagascans.
Yeah, of course, speaking in a pre-recorded televised conversation from the State Palace, the colonel who rose to power after weeks of tension and youth-led demonstration, of course, he recounted the dramatic 3-week struggle that reshaped the island. Of course, Radiarina family rejected the claim that the fall of his predecessor, Andry Rajoelina, was a coup. Of course, he said that there was no violence that he was also responding to accusation of judicial revenge against the former regime that he said was blunt, and investigation are the work of justice, not vigilance, and vowed to pursue those who plundered the country. Of course, he also laid out the Madagascar's roadmap, where he announced a nationwide consultation led by FFKM to rebuild a new governance system, followed by what he said, of course, a referendum and, of course, a presidential election within 2 years. Of course, he also promised a new youth assembly and a stronger place for the Malagasy language and history in schools. And of course, there are questions whether Randrianirina will be contesting for presidency. And he said that that solely belong to the people. People will decide whether they need him during the poll that is said to be in 2 years' time. And of course, he urged patience, reminding the citizens that rebuilding the nation cannot be done in 2 months and must be a collective responsibility of all the Malagasy people.
All right, and very briefly, a sad milestone. Kizza Besigye now in detention for a whole year, and I guess this is continuing to raise questions about how Uganda treats opposition figures and generally political freedom.
Yeah, of course, Peter Dore is so sad because it is since now 1 year since Besigye and his political aide Haji Obeid Lutale were arrested, and they have been spending, time in custody, and this is following their abduction in Nairobi on October 16th. And subsequent transfer to Kampala, where they have been arraigned before General Court and Marshal, and of course their prolonged incarceration amid stalled investigation, contested bail hearing, and allegation of judicial interference as renewed scrutiny of Uganda's political freedom, and of course the treatment of the opposition figures. And Besigye and Lutale face charges relating to national security and unlawful possession of firearms and, of course, the ammunition. And they were initially remanded in Luzira Maximum Security Prison. Of course, they're still hoping that, of course, after 1 year, they'll be released, because remember, the Ugandan election will be happening soon. And, of course, there were fears that, of course, Kizza Besigye will be the main threat to the Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni. Of course, we've seen the High Court Justice Rosette Comfort Kania rejecting his formal bail application, citing, of course, the risk of interference with the ongoing investigation due to what they termed as high standing in society, despite acknowledging Besigye's age and deteriorating health.
Dennis, unfortunately, we've run out of time as we always do, but thank you so much always for your comprehensive updates from East Africa. Thank you so much. Asante sana. Kwaheri.
Karibu sana, kuwa na siku njema.
That's our regular correspondent and analyst and a person who keeps a track of what's happening for us, Dennis Beru, who's a journalist and team leader at Grassroot Journalism in Kenya, keeping us up to date with what's happening in East Africa. Right now, though, we come back to our studios here in Johannesburg, and with the news headlines, we say good morning once again to Onele Nsinsi.
SABC